Hello everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Kuroi, and this is my episode 1 to Nioh Boss's Guides, Onryoki. Now before we get into the boss, I'm just going to go over some recommended items. It being the first boss and all, it's fairly simple, so the only recommended item that I will list is the elixir. The 7 other slots can be filled by your own choice, so whatever you prefer to use, whether it's ninjutsu or magic, go ahead, fill it out however you want to. I have calculated Onryoki's health to be at around 8,600 hit points. This was accumulated over about 10 runs, with my average deviation only being about 1.5% away from 8,600. Onryoki has 2 phases. Phase 2 will start after you deal about 2,650 hit points of damage to Onryoki. In all of my sessions, Onryoki never broke free prior to that value, so it's about the hit points you should expect to deal before he actually breaks into Phase 2. Onryoki's first phase is the chained phase, as I like to call it, because he's very slow and over-encumbered from having to lug around the ball and chains around, and I'm sure a lot of you married men understand how he feels out there, but I digress. During this phase, he has 3 basic different attack moves. Onryoki's first attack sequence is an over-the-head chain swing, whether it's a single or double. The easiest way to avoid this attack is to simply dodge either right or left. Now, I personally recommend dodging to the side of his body that he is not swinging, mainly because he tends to go into a secondary swing. So if he swung his first chain first and you dodge to his left side, instead of going into a spin, from my experiences, he has typically gone for the over-the-head left chain swing. So it allows you for a better opportunity to be able to get in some damage before having to run away or back off. His second attack sequence is the 180-degree spin. This is the faster of the 2 spins that he has in Phase 1. I'd recommend either dodging straight back when this is coming or running straight back. Both are very viable. If you don't feel like you're going to get away fast enough, hold down your dodge as well, because the attack will eat away at your stamina. However, it will save you from losing a chunk of your health. And in my opinion, if you had to lose your stamina for a short period of time as opposed to taking a huge hit, the stamina is the way to go for this sequence, because you do have a little bit of time to recover. Now the third attack sequence is a 360-degree spin. This one can be the more deadly out of the 3 attacks that he has in the first sequence, mainly due to positioning. If you position yourself to be on his side, typically his right side, I don't think I've ever seen him spin counterclockwise, but he'll spin clockwise, and if you're on his right side when he starts to spin and you get hit, there's a chance that you can get hit again from when he comes back around from the rotation. So be careful of those. If you're worried about the spins, I would highly recommend either dodging to the right on the overhead swings, or once you do dodge the overhead swing and you attack, just back off in anticipation of the spin, and you should be good. So after dealing 2,650 hit points against Onryoki, his chains will break and he'll go into his second phase. I like to call this phase the liberated phase. He will be moving a lot faster, and he does have quite a few more attack sequences, so it's very important to keep your eye on his movements to identify what type of attack is coming. Although most of them can be dodged the same way, which makes it nice for our beginners. So his first attack sequence that he has is an overhead slam. It's pretty much just like the chain swing, just minus the ball and chain. It can be done with either of his hands. You can dodge either left or right. As long as you're closer to his body, it makes it a little bit easier to dodge. But go ahead, dodge him, do a couple of attacks, but keep aware that he can follow up any attack sequence in Phase 2 with an immediate attack. So just be careful and be ready to dodge again. His second attack sequence is a swipe. It is a bit further back, it's a little bit wider than an overhead swing, But at the same time, if you are up and close to Onryoki, when he does this attack, it is very easy to dodge, whether or not you dodge left or right, mainly because the effective attack radius of this attack is actually going to be behind you if you are closer to Onryoki. The third attack sequence is a jumping slam. He's pretty much going to leap up, grab both of his hands together, and slam down on the ground. You can either dodge left or right, that is an effective dodge, or you can even dodge towards him, and then he'll jump right over you. Both are very good. And if you do dodge forward or even left, most of the time you'll end up right behind him anyways. It gives you some nice back stab damage, because Nioh does have a slight mechanic where if you attack somebody from behind, you actually deal a little bit of bonus damage. So once he jumps, typically he doesn't do a lot of attacks right after jumping, but he can. It happened a few times, so just be wary. After all these attacks there can be a follow-up, but he doesn't normally chain more than 2 or 3 after one another. If you do position yourself after dodging any of the aforementioned attacks, be wary of his 180-degree spin. It's functionally the same thing as in Phase 1. It sometimes is a little bit harder to detect. However, dodging right normally can get you in the safe zone. However, just be wary if you are behind him and attacking him. Back off a bit in anticipation of the 180-degree spin. Once the spin goes through, run back in and deal some damage. Now the last, what I would consider basic attack moves that Phase 2 has is the throwing attack. Onryoki will walk over to one of his 2 cannonballs that he was previously using in Phase 1, pick it up, and throw it at you. Now, to dodge this, you're simply going to want to wait until the arc of Onryoki's throw is passing his head. So pretty much right as the cannonball leaves his hands is when you're going to want to dodge the attack itself. Now personally, I like to be in the furthest corner away from Onryoki when he is doing this attack. It gives me the most amount of time to not only dodge the attack, but also it positions the cannonballs away from the center of the room, allowing me more space to move and dodge freely, because in past experiences, if people don't position themselves in a way to remove the cannonballs from the center of the arena, I have seen people get caught on the cannonballs when trying to dodge Onryoki, and you pretty much get caught between Onryoki and a hard place. Now the next 3 attack sequences I would consider special attacks, because Onryoki's hands will glow and they'll deal bonus damage on these attacks. Another special thing with these attacks is, for the most part, they'll leave behind a cloud of miasma. Now that's the effect that you see on the ground when fighting a yokai and the ground becomes tainted and you can't regenerate ki, while yokais are actually regenerating ki at a much faster pace. So the first attack sequence that he has, which is a special attack, is an overhead slam. Now it's exactly like the aforementioned overhead slam, however it does deal bonus damage, and once he lands, it will leave a cloud of miasma behind. If you're comfortable with your ki pulses enough to jump in really quickly and disperse the miasma, it's highly recommended, because otherwise it'll be hard to deplete Onryoki's ki, which would be nice and staggering him to be able to deal some good consistent damage. However, I will talk about the ki depletion in just a little bit. The second special attack that Onryoki has is a grapple. Basically, he'll try to give you a big old bear hug. I found this easiest to dodge by being closer to Onryoki and then dodging either right or left. That'll position you in a nice spot to be able to deal a little bit of damage and then back off for just a moment in anticipation of a secondary attack, whether it's a spin or a swipe. However, if you are further away from Onryoki, it'd be better to run backwards, because if you're just in the right zone where you try to dodge left or right and you're not close enough to him, he'll easily grab you up with that special attack and slam you down on the ground after biting your face off. It's probably the worst kiss you'll ever experience. Now for his final special attack, it is a falling with style wannabe Buzz Lightyear move where he'll basically trip a little bit, do a barrel roll, and then slam on the ground. During this point, it's highly recommended that you just run away from him enough because the hitbox on his body slams are very deceiving. So it's better that you just stay further back, go into a high stance, because after he lands you are guaranteed some time while he's trying to get up from the attack to deal really good damage. I personally like to go into a high stance and position myself in such a way after this attack to where I can hit Onryoki's horns. Because just like every other Oni in the game, Onryoki's weak spot is his horns. If you're able to break Onryoki's horns, he'll go into pretty much a stunned status. It's not quite like ki depletion, but he'll sit on all fours for roughly about 5 seconds. Not terribly long, so be careful. But right after you break his horns, you have about 5 seconds to deal in some burst damage, and then back off a little bit because he can do a swipe from the ground, and it can deal significant damage to you. But not only that, it is very annoying if you try to block it, because then you're right on top of him when he's standing up. So deal a little bit of burst damage if you're able to break his horns. You can only do it once, so capitalize on the opportunity as soon as it happens for you. But the last mechanic I would like to talk about in this video is depleting Onryoki's ki. If you're able to get Onryoki's ki down to 0 and it starts to red bar, go ahead. If you like going into your Spirit Guardian mode, I'd recommend doing it at that point while you're close to him so that the summoning of your Spirit Guardian helps stagger him. But go ahead, wail into him at this point. You're able to stun lock him for a good portion of time, but be careful because as soon as he replenishes his ki, he's going to lean back a little bit on his hind legs, and then he's going to jump forward for a body slam. It'll happen every time that he goes from ki depletion to summoning his miasma to replenish his own ki. So be careful of that body slam after you deplete his ki. Don't be too focused on dealing damage, trying to stagger him too much. As soon as you see his ki be replenished, back off immediately, because that body slam can and will one-shot you. Now that pretty wraps up this entire video for all the mechanics that you need to know in order to beat Onryoki, the Isle of Demons boss. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, go ahead, put a comment in the comment section, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like about my video, and I'd like to make adjustments for future videos. Otherwise, until next time, happy hunting.